Thank you. Good evening. Can everyone hear me all right? Awesome. Thank you very much. My name is Christina Mahey. I'm an Assistant United States Attorney with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I am from the Dayton office, but we have offices in Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. And here we go. So this is our chain of command. My boss is the gentleman on the far left. That's the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio, Ken Parker. His boss is the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. And then above him is obviously the president. So we prosecute all federal crimes in the Southern District of Ohio. The Southern District of Ohio is basically the southern half of the state. They're divided into 3 separate divisions. So we've got federal courthouses for each of those divisions, and we have 3 different U.S. Attorney's offices for those divisions. But we have jurisdiction to prosecute any crimes in the southern half of Ohio. This is just a little infographic of what a courtroom looks like. A lot of you might know this already, but you can see you have the judge in the center, and then to his right is the witness stand, to his left is the court clerk. You have the jury box. Right next to the jury box is the prosecution. That's where we would sit. The prosecution always gets to sit closer to the jury because we have the burden of proof. So a lot of times when people walk into a courtroom, they don't know where the prosecution or the defense sits, and that's always the way to figure it out. Defense is on the other side, and then in the back would be the audience. These are just a couple of pictures of federal courthouses. All right. So it's a little bit confusing. There are a couple of different types of prosecutors. At the local level, and the ones that you're probably most likely to come into contact with are the county prosecutors. We're in Mason tonight, so your county prosecutor would be the Mason County Prosecutor's Office. County prosecutors handle the majority of your crimes, your day-to-day crimes. If someone steals your purse, if someone breaks into your house, if someone gets in a bar fight, the county would handle those sorts of crimes. Above that is the state level. That's the Ohio Attorney General's office. The AG's office has a lot of different specialized divisions that I'm not qualified to speak on at great length. But in terms of affirmative prosecution, they will help counties out with complex cases, or if a county is conflicted out. If someone that the prosecutor's office has a close working relationship with, has criminal charges brought against them, the AG's office can come and help out with that. And then finally, there's my office. The U.S. Attorney's Office is the federal level. So we prosecute all federal crimes. And what that means is there has to be some kind of federal nexus. So it either has to be a crime that Congress has specifically designated as violating the United States Code. For instance, drug crimes, those are specifically delineated in United States law as being federal crimes. Or someone has to cross state lines. So for instance, a felon possessing a firearm. Felons are not allowed to possess firearms in the state of Ohio. If a felon had a firearm that was manufactured solely in the state of Ohio, that wouldn't be a federal crime. Most firearms, however, are manufactured outside the state of Ohio. So if you have a firearm that was made in Texas or Georgia that crosses state lines and it ends up in the hands of a felon in Ohio, that crossing state lines makes it a federal crime, and that's where we get involved. This just states the mission of the Department of Justice. It is to enforce the law and defend the interests of the United States according to the law, to ensure public safety against threats foreign and domestic, to provide federal leadership in preventing and controlling crime, to seek just punishment for those guilty of unlawful behavior, and to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice for all Americans. So the duties of an AUSA, someone who works for our office. So the first is to seek justice for the victims, the community, and the defendants. So our job, and really for all prosecutors, it's not to get the absolute longest sentence we possibly can. It's not to win at any cost. Our job is to get a just outcome, a just sentence, a just charging decision, maybe not charging. Our job is to look out for both sides and try and reach a solution that's fair and just for everyone. We vindicate victims' rights, we work with them, we help them, we support them. However, we are not the victims' attorneys. We represent the United States of America. And so that's something that makes our job a little unique. It distinguishes us from defense attorneys. Defense attorneys, by contrast, they represent their client. Their job is to do the best they possibly can do for their client. You know, even if they know their client's guilty, their job is still to get the best outcome they can for their client. And that's what they should do. That's important. And defense attorneys are also important because they hold prosecutors to their burden. They make sure we're doing our jobs correctly, and they hold us accountable. And that's the way the system works, is if we have two sides who are doing their jobs and working as hard as they can and playing by the rules. The duties of an AUSA are also to protect the constitutional rights of the defendant. So we have an obligation to make sure that the defendant's speedy trial rights, his Fourth Amendment rights, his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights, that those rights are being followed, basically to ensure that the process is fair. It's not in the interest of the United States to have an unfair process, even if it means that we win in the end. It's in our interest to have a process that's fair and impartial, and that makes sure that the defendant's rights are protected. This is the seal of the Department of Justice, and our motto, which is in Latin, Qui pro domina justitiae sequitur, which I have pronounced very poorly. But what it means is who prosecutes on behalf of justice. And so that's our mission. These are different law enforcement partners that we work with. A lot of them were here tonight at the Mason Community Safety Summit. So we work with FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, Secret Service, IRS, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and then local police departments and sheriff's offices will bring us cases as well if they implicate federal crimes. So the types of cases we deal with, like I said, it's only federal crimes, it's only violations of United States law, but that can include terrorism and national security cases, human trafficking, gang and gun violence, child pornography and child exploitation offenses, drug cartels, pill mills, white-collar crime, and environmental crime. Here in Ohio, you probably know there's an opioid epidemic, not just in this state, but we do have a lot of that here, and so our office does focus a great deal on narcotics trafficking, organized crime, and firearm offenses. Okay, what an assistant United States attorney does every day. So there are three large components to our job. The first is we assist our law enforcement partners with investigations. That's something I really like about my job, is we work closely with our law enforcement partners before charges are even brought. So if they're seeking a search warrant or a subpoena, they'll run that by us and we'll review it. If they've interviewed certain witnesses, we'll talk about that. But law enforcement investigates the crime and then they'll bring it to us and say, here's the evidence we have so far. And then it's up to the prosecutor to say, okay, that's enough to charge, or there's a crime here, but there's not quite enough to charge. You need to go do these couple more investigative steps, or you know what, I don't think there's a crime here. The next thing is an AUSA files charges and litigates the case. So once charges are filed, either by indictment or bill of information, we follow that case all the way through to the end. So we'll do kind of the typical courtroom activities that you see on television in Law and Order and shows like that. We'll argue motions to suppress. We'll have trials, plea hearings. We argue at sentencing. And then if the case gets appealed, our office will handle the appeal as well. And finally, we advocate for victim rights. We work closely with the victims to make sure that they know what's going on in the process. They have a right to be heard. They have a right to know what's happening. And so we keep them up to date with the progress of the case, the custodial status of the defendant, what the next steps are. We talk to them about what resolution they want in the case, what they'd like to see, and then we also help connect them with victim services. These are just a couple of examples of news releases of recent cases our office has handled. This is one from a national security case. So we handle national security and terrorism cases. We also handle hate crimes. This is a hate crime investigation based on gender. We also have a civil division that does affirmative litigation that handles violations of people's civil rights. I'm not a civil AUSA, so I'm going to talk more about the criminal side, but we also do prosecute violations of civil liberties. This was a national security case as well, having to do with a spy, a foreign agent. This was actually a case I prosecuted. We handle child pornography cases as well. The reason those are federal is because most of them use the internet, and the internet crosses state lines, so that's how the federal government gets involved in those crimes. This was a organized crime case. MS-13 was a really prolific gang. And I know our law enforcement partners and people in our office worked very hard combating that in this specific case and in others. Okay, how to report a crime. So our website has an entire section devoted to how to report certain types of crimes. Obviously, the best thing to do in an emergency is always to call 911. But we also have specific hotlines for different types of offenses, elder abuse, fraud, domestic violence, human trafficking, hate crimes, more specific and specialized types of crimes. So you can see that's just the Department of Justice website, the page, Report a Crime. So that's where you can find that. Victims' rights. So I touched on this earlier, that one of our jobs is to vindicate victims' rights, to make sure that they're being respected. And victims actually have rights by law. They're codified in United States statute, and most states also have specific state laws codifying these same rights as well. Victims have the right to be reasonably protected from the accused. They have the right to be heard. They have the right to consult with the prosecution team about plea offers and things of that nature. There's a longer list there. And those all come straight from the United States Code. So there are a number of crime victim services and places to receive those. Our office specifically has a designated victim witness coordinator whose job it is to work with witnesses, but particularly with victims, and to help walk them through the process. You know, a lot of times the attorneys, we're trying to just get the information out of them so we can put forward the best case we can. The victim witness coordinator is there to explain to them what's happening, what the process is, what the next step is going to be. They'll call them and let them know about court dates. They'll come to sentencing with them and sit with them as moral support. And they'll help them, and they'll help connect them to local community resources and services. The Department of Justice also has the Office of Victims of Crime, OVC, and there are two different notification systems, a federal one, which is VNS, and a state one, VINE, Victim Notification System. And what those are is if you've been the victim of a crime and the offender has been prosecuted and has been incarcerated, you want to sign up in these systems because they'll automatically notify victims' families of any custodial any change in that in the defendant's custodial status. So if the defendant's going to get out on parole, if he's being moved to a different prison, you know, if he's finally being released, you know, sometimes that can happen 20 or 30 years down the road. The prosecutor who prosecuted the case might not even still be working at the office. So it's important to have that electronic backup that will automatically notify the victims' families and let them know so there's no surprises. The Ohio Attorney General's office also has an excellent victim program. They specifically have a crime victims compensation fund that's detailed on their website that helps reimburse victims of crimes for expenses related to those crimes. The defendant is supposed to make the victim whole At sentencing, we can order what's called restitution, which is essentially a monetary payment that is to make the victim whole. A lot of times the defendant won't have the money to do that. The harm that was done to the victim, it's going to take counseling, therapy, medical bills if there was physical injury. The defendant just might not be able to make those payments, and the victim is still kind of stuck in this bad position. And so that's where these programs come in to fill that gap and try and compensate victims for their losses. And then there's a huge number of local resources for victims as well.
Domestic violence, identity theft, sexual assault, homicide, human trafficking, elder abuse.
Being a victim of a crime can be a devastating experience for survivors and their families.
While these crimes differ, some of the effects may be similar.
Confusion, economic hardship, physical injury, feelings of isolation.
If you or someone you know is a survivor of crime, the Office for Victims of Crime wants you to know that you have rights and there is help.
The Crime Victims' Rights Act was passed by Congress to guarantee fundamental rights to victims of crime.
And most states have taken action to guarantee rights for crime victims.
These rights include
the right to be reasonably protected from the accused offender,
the right to have input at sentencing, such as providing a victim impact statement,
the right to information about the imprisonment and the release of the offender,
the right to be treated with fairness and with respect.
If you are a victim, these rights apply to you.
The Office for Victims of Crime provides money to states, federal agencies, and other organizations that serve victims throughout the United States.
Money from the Office for Victims of Crime supports two types of programs: state-run victim assistance programs and state-run victim compensation programs. Victim assistance programs provide direct services such as crisis intervention, counseling, emergency shelter, and criminal justice advocacy.
Victim compensation programs compensate victims for eligible expenses related to their victimization.
Expenses may include medical cost, mental health counseling, funeral and burial cost, and lost wages.
If you or someone you know is a victim of crime, there are resources.
As a result of the dedicated efforts of victim specialists, legal advocates, and criminal justice personnel, there are thousands of programs and trained professionals across the nation ready to provide you with help.
For more information on how to obtain help, visit www.ovc.gov/help.
Okay, so that was just a short video on the Department of Justice's Office for the Victims of Crime. As I mentioned before, the Ohio Attorney General's Office also has a similar program. This is the page on their website. It's the Victim Services section, and there you can find particularly the Victims Compensation Fund, where victims can apply for reimbursement for expenses related to their victimization. Probably the most useful is local resources. The OVC provides funding for these local resources for people who are in the community who really have specialization for different types of crimes to provide the help that people need. So you can actually go on the OVC website to this section here, and there's a search, and you can search by city. If you're in the city of Cincinnati, you can search by the type of crime, you can search by, elder abuse or domestic violence to find local agencies that are specifically specializing in providing help to those types of individuals. Okay, and to end on a lighter note, the U.S. Attorney's Office has a legal extern program in each of our 3 cities, Cincinnati, Dayton, and Columbus. It's for law students to come and extern with our office for either a school semester or for the summer semester. It's an unpaid position, but we do have students who can do the externship for school credit, and you have to be a law student, and you have to pass a background check. Legal interns help us with legal research and writing. They help us draft responses to motions, sentencing memoranda. They accompany us to court. They help us prepare for trial. I did a number of externships when I was in law school, and every one of them was a really great experience. They were all with prosecutors' offices, and it really let me know that that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. So I think our program is excellent. It gives students a lot of experience and exposure to get to see what being a federal prosecutor actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. So any law students who are interested, I would highly recommend that they look into it. And that's everything. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me. All right, seeing none, thank you all very much.